Well, folks, Jaire Alexander is a Baltimore Raven. He will not be joining the Miami Dolphins roster. This was a player that a lot of fans, and myself included, would have liked Chris Grier to go out and sign to replace Jalen Ramsey when he inevitably gets traded. Well, that will not be the case. And on today's show, we're going to look at the fallout of the dominoes that will ultimately fall with Alexander going to Baltimore. I didn't expect the Ravens to be a team that was seriously looking to add a corner because their secondary seemed pretty good to me. Evidently not the case, and we got a lot to talk about. Before we get into everything on today's show, I want to know the real ones. One-word reaction to Jaire Alexander going to the Baltimore Ravens. I'm about to give you my one-word reaction, but I want to hear yours first. Get down in the comments and let me know. My one word, bad. And it's just for so many different reasons, too. And we'll go through why this is a bad thing for Miami. Obviously, the number one reason why this is not good is because this was a player that the Miami Dolphins were going to go target. But I did want to share this first as well, is that there were other offers out there for Alexander. Adam Schefter had the note earlier today that when Alexander signed with the Ravens, it was a 1-year, $6 million deal, $4 million base, $2 million in incentives. He actually turned down more money to go with the Ravens and his former college teammate at Louisville in Lamar Jackson. Could Miami have been one of those teams that offered more money that Alexander ultimately turned down to go play in Baltimore? I don't know. Maybe that will come out in the next week or so, but it's nothing clear here. The point is, it's not an expensive deal. You could look at that two ways. That could be a bad thing. It's just like, well, Miami didn't get in on that price tag for Jaire Alexander, clearly the best free agent corner left on the market. It could also be looked at as a good thing if you're a positive person in terms of, well, if Alexander's going for 1 for 6, these other corners like Rasul Douglas, Asante Samuel Jr. are going to be even cheaper for Miami to add to their roster, as that is a massive need. But let's go through the 3 reasons why I think this is a very bad thing that Alexander went to Baltimore for Miami. Well, number 1 is what I alluded to just a second ago. The Dolphins missed out on Alexander. We have talked ad nauseum this offseason, ever since the draft, where Miami only drafted Jason Marshall Jr., that a cornerback was going to be needed to add to this roster, right? And that was before the Jalen Ramsey trade stuff. Like, now that the Jalen Ramsey trade stuff is going to probably pick up over the next month and he will be off the roster sooner than later, like, you need to sign a corner. Because right now, Storm Duck and Cam Smith are your 2 outside corners. That's probably the worst cornerback duo in the NFL when you're looking at 2 boundary corners. And you're playing in the AFC East. You're playing against Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. Consistently, you just simply can't throw that on the back end. And I'll be honest, like, I didn't think the Dolphins were going to sign Jaire Alexander. I was hoping that Chris Grier would jump all over it and attempt to, but I didn't have them as a top 3 destination because I always knew Jaire was going to try to go to a contender or a team that was going to pay him a lot of money. Obviously, he didn't get the money aspect of it, but he certainly got the contender part of it. The Ravens are going to likely be either number 1 or number 2 preseason and Super Bowl favorites out of the AFC. Probably going to be Kansas City 1, because how can you not? But Baltimore is probably going to be number 2 after they have just been one of the best teams in the AFC consistently over the past 3 seasons. And that's where we get to number 2. The rich get richer. This might not impact Miami because the Dolphins probably weren't contending for an AFC championship or a Super Bowl berth this season with where they are at in their roster construction. But the Ravens just continue to stockpile elite players on their team. Like, all-pro after all-pro. It's unbelievable. Their secondary is disgusting. It is absolutely insane how good it is. Jaire Alexander, Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins, Kyle Hamilton, and then their first-round pick, Malachi Starks. That's unfair. That is the best secondary in the NFL. And y'all know how I felt about Malachi Starks if you were subscribed throughout our draft process, because it was a player that I was very much wanting Miami to take, even if they stayed at 13 and took him. Now, I am happy with Kenneth Grant. I ultimately had him higher on my big board when things came to be in late April. But Malachi Starks is someone I was really high on. So the fact that the Ravens secondary now looks like this, you pair that up with their always consistent, solid front 7, is it safe to say, like, is it crazy to say they're going to have a top 5 defense in the NFL? Like, no, it might be number 1. So it's going to be tougher to beat them in the AFC playoffs. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel for full coverage of the Miami Dolphins every single day. We are 42 subscribers away from 70,500. Let's get there on today's video because we're talking everything around the Dolphins and how they are impacted by other NFL news as well, so join the channel. The third and final reason why this is such a bad thing for the Miami Dolphins, well, it's because one of the top free agents for Miami to go out and sign is no longer there. The free agency pool got a little bit more slim today. That's not only bad for Miami in terms of trying to add someone to their roster, but it's also tough because now you will see other teams that need a corner, like a Green Bay Packers, like a Pittsburgh Steelers, New Orleans Saints, maybe be willing to bid more on these four guys, which only add more competition for Miami, which could either drive up the price point for these free agents or potentially steal these free agents from the Miami Dolphins. That is something that could be a little bit dicey for Chris Grier in Miami. We'll talk more about this in a second, but I gotta show love to Mando. Have you ever stepped outside and felt like you're instantly drenched in sweat? It's like no matter what you do, it does not stop. And trust me, living in Dallas, Texas, it's every time I step outside. If you've been struggling with the heat and humidity like I have, I've got great news. Mando has just launched something that takes sweat control to the next level. Introducing the Mando Deodorant Plus Sweat Control Solid Stick. It's double protection. Finally, you get the odor control you love with Mando, plus powerful sweat control. Mando Starter Pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, like many body wash and deodorant wipes, plus free shipping. And one of my favorite products was always the deodorant wipes. And it still is, because it can take you anywhere, whether you're traveling on the go or just running errands. And it helped me freshen up if I did have a little bit sweat. Well, I don't have to worry about that anymore. And that's why I love that deodorant that has the sweat control. And as a perfect offer for listeners, new customers get 20% off site-wide with our exclusive code CHAT. Use code CHAT at shopmando.com for 20% off site-wide plus free shipping. shopmando.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Mando's got you covered with deodorant plus sweat control. Say goodbye to sweat stains and hello to long-lasting freshness. All right, more talk on Jaire Alexander. This could be really bad for Miami. And I kind of just alluded to it a second ago. Teams that wanted Jaire Alexander will turn their attention to the free agents Miami want to go after. Rasul Douglas, Stephon Gilmore, Asante Samuel Jr. You will see more competition on trying to lure those free agent corners to the 305, which could ultimately lead to Miami having to pony up a little bit more money to sign some of these guys. And remember, that's an issue with Rasul Douglas. Miami had Douglas to headquarters, talked to him, had a meeting, and then offered him a contract that Douglas ultimately turned down, and it's why he's still a free agent. He wants more money for Miami. Well, he might get more money now that they have to compete to sign him a little bit more because Jaire Alexander is now off the market. But this also has an impact on Jalen Ramsey, the player that Miami is obviously close to trading away. Teams that were interested in Jaire Alexander could pivot and try to trade for Jalen Ramsey now. So we talked about why this is bad for the Fins. Well, it ultimately could actually be beneficial in terms of the Jalen Ramsey market as well. Because now you could see the price tag on Ramsey jump up a little bit. And the intrigue jump up since he is now clearly the best corner available when you combine the trade market and the free agency market. And I want to toss it back to a tweet that came out about a week ago from Slick Rick. Because he has been on a heater this offseason and said that the Steelers have inquired about Jaire Alexander and Jalen Ramsey. But he's expecting the Steelers to get one of them. Well, Jaire Alexander went to their rival in terms of the Baltimore Ravens. So if we are taking Slick Rick's report at value here, which I think is very fair to do, that would then insinuate that the Steelers will get a little aggressive to try to add Jalen Ramsey to their secondary. So that's something to keep an eye on. More conversation on Ramsey here in a second, but predict it for me. After the Ravens signed Jaire Alexander, what team trades for the Dolphins All-Pro corner? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. These are the 5 most likely team in my books, and we've talked about these 5 quite a bit. Los Angeles Rams have been the leader in my mind for the Jalen Ramsey sweepstakes for quite a while. I will then put Pittsburgh probably number 2. I'd put Green Bay number 3, and then you could probably go with 4A or 4B with the Washington Commanders and Atlanta Falcons. But these 3 feel like the most likely. Why? It's because all 3 of them are kind of in a win-now mode. The Rams are trying to win now with Stafford. The Packers are trying to win now with Love in a weaker NFC. And the Steelers, after signing Aaron Rodgers, are probably going to try to be more competitive than they have been the past couple of years. And all 3 of them would greatly benefit by adding Jalen Ramsey to their defense and their roster. You could see the Jalen Ramsey market start to heat up. It could lead to a trade happening sooner rather than later. I have predicted, at least where we are in the offseason now, not one to happen until like July 7th in that range, because usually front offices take a couple-week break in between minicamp in July to gather their bearings before training camp and the preseason get underway. But maybe that's not the case anymore. Maybe these GMs are like, all right, we'll take our 2-week vacation, but let's get Jalen Ramsey done and then get him in the building sooner rather than later so he can be ready to roll for training camp. And I do want Dolphins fans to remember this as we close out today's show. Miami saves $9.9 million in cap space when they trade Jalen Ramsey. Now, we'll see what the financial aspect will ultimately be depending on the opposing team and how much they pay the contract in comparison to how much Miami pays. But right now, if you trade him, you save $9.9 mil, which could then help you maybe offer a little bit more money to those free agent corners we showed earlier in the show with Rasul Douglas, Mike Hilton, Stephon Gilmore, and Asante Samuel Jr. So to me, going forward in the offseason, Miami should really prioritize trading Jalen Ramsey. And then once they get that trade done, they have more money to spend in free agency the rest of the way. Then you start to aggressively pursue some of those free agent corners. That will do it for today's episode. Appreciate everybody watching. And if you have not subscribed already, do so as daily coverage of the Fins continues to come your way. And if you are still watching and you're not subscribed, clearly like what we're doing. So what are you waiting for? Join the channel today.